Hey, what's up, everyone? I wanted to make this video to break down the concept that I like to call storytelling in the market. It's understanding the narrative of what's going on to keep you on side and also keep you at bay for potential changes in momentum and structure in the market. So, what I'm going to be doing is breaking down how I can use the concepts of auction market theory mixed with some price action and order flow to let me know what the general storyline of the market is. What is the narrative? What is the potential directionality and the expected move of things? So right now, this is the S&P. I'm going to focus on the S&P today. It's still, market's still open. It's Thursday the 11th, right? We have this strong rally. I got two left on these spoos here. We can try to close one out at market somewhere here and then leave just one running. But why did I look at this as a potential long opportunity, right? Everything in the market revolves around buying and selling, a two-way auction. So for that, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be breaking down auction market theory. I'm going to be breaking down the use of the volume profile. And with that, we can understand the narrative and the story. The two main questions that I always ask myself, whether it's to prepare for the market, pre-market, or as the day is shaping up, is number one, where is price and how did price get there? So these questions are in relation to where is price from a balance perspective. If I'm looking at this chart, you have a huge composite volume profile, a 200-day or a 300-day, and each of these bellies, they represent some level of balance. Now, if I go by the principle that markets move from one balance to another balance and so on and so forth, I can group these balances together and try to identify what the storyline is of this market. For instance, if I'm looking at the S&P today, right, and I have this general balance over here that had been developing, right, somewhere between this 40, this low 40, 68, 40. I'm just grabbing the belly, the most pronounced area, and the bottom is the 24 area. I'm going to be looking at the ETH, right? I'm going to be looking at the ETH, how it's moved in relation to this developing balance. And then I'm going to see if I can create some kind of narrative for the current day itself. So what that would mean is if prices are inside of a balanced area, I'd expect prices to move within that region, meaning some kind of bearish momentum. If they're outside and we move from below to above, I expect some kind of bullish momentum. So the idea is always a narrative. Or what's the story? What is the story trying to tell me? So if I look at any individual day, right, any individual move, whether it's the day itself or whether it's the actual intraday movement, I can look at this in relation to where the balance is, right? And I ask myself, where is price? So let's say price is outside of the balance. So it's above this balance. It could be below, it could be inside. And I ask myself, okay, how did it get there? What is the most recent move that dictated the actual momentum of the move inside the balance or outside? So for instance, if I see that price over here, this the red triangle, on the ETH, it's outside the balance, it's above the balance, and I can say, okay, how did it get there? Well, it moved from within, right, to above slightly. So what that tells me is there's some kind of bullish narrative in and around this 40 area. There's going to be some kind of bullish narrative in and around the 40, right? If I lose that 40, the narrative flips. And then I'm going to use some kind of price action realistically to determine if this is actually valid or not. Now, if I have an area of support, such as this 40, my thought process is, if we've already tested it once, can it create higher highs, right? And if so, then I can still abuse the 40 as support structure. If I can't and we start moving through the 40, I'm going to be abusing it as resistance to sell into until we can get back above and it resets that kind of momentum. So as I'm looking at this, I can always ask myself, okay, where are we and how did price get there? So pre-market, right, we can see that there is a lot going on over here. There's huge development of negative delta, right? There's absorption into these lows in and around that 40 on the S&P. And it's not like, oh, okay, I'm dying to buy this area pre-market. I want to see if we're holding this region, this grayed out box that I have here, can we create some even incremental higher highs? Okay, valid. It does that. Now that price is above this area, it's above the 40, I can say, okay, into the 40, if there's a level of absorption that takes place from that perspective, like we have over here, into this negative delta, then I can look for the long idea to continue higher. Okay, fantastic. It makes a new high. However, there's a change in structure. So for me to want to continuously buy this 40, I need to see a stall out of absorption holding that area, which is just not the case in this instance, and we rotate lower. So now I ask myself, if I see price over here and I see all this red absorption, Instead of me thinking, oh, let me just buy it, let me buy it, I can say, okay, where am I in relation to the balance? So we're under the 40. We're within this like little micro balance, about 20 points. We're under it and we came from above. So I can look to sell some rallies into it to see if we can actually make lower lows, right? That's going to be a huge aspect to this. If I cannot make lower lows, then the validity of that 40 starts to wane and you most likely have this expansion higher. It's the same thing over here. So at a certain point, if I'm looking at this 40, we dump into it, and what happens? We hold the same low with a very heavy degree of absorption over here. So we move above, and I can say again, okay, let's say I'm a little confused. This is a very good tool to think of when markets are volatile, right? Because when markets are volatile, like there's a lot of whipping back and forth realistically. And what happens is traders get sucked in by market movement. So when they get sucked in by market movement, they're like, oh, it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. They lose sight of the actual narrative and what is the market doing in relation to the balances. So if I see prices, they're up here somewhere, and I have this 40 as a pivot, it's the balance area. And I say, okay, well, realistically, prices are above the 40. They're about 50 somewhere. Okay, fantastic. For us to hold out the narrative to the upside swing, we need to see some kind of hold of this area. There's a bunch of nice positive delta here. Can they hold it? Can they create some absorption? They say no. Okay, fair enough. You got massive absorption until low. You can see here it's stacking up negative delta. Valid. Now, us being below this area, well, is there any reason to sell into it? Any absorption, any sell side? Not really. Instead, we start making the move higher highs, right? Higher lows. So the idea is I can use this now as support structure from this positive delta to see if we can swing higher and open things up. Because one of the things with delta is if we keep knocking at the door of prior absorption, because let's say there's absorption here, it pulls lower, it comes back to the same area, there's absorption here, it pulls lower, it comes back to the same area. These buyers are going to get fed up and eventually you're going to see this massive move. So this adds to the narrative understanding that we've got. So when I look at this, I'm trying to understand, are we outside, inside of the balance? How did we get there? And what kind of price action is kind of leading the market movement? So if I'm looking at this right now and we're within a new balance here, I still have this one little dingly lot left, but if we're within this balance right now above this 65 on the S&P, and you have, well, some people got a little absorbed there, you have nice buying that continued the move higher. So realistically, this spot over here, from a narrative perspective, we're inside of a balance. How do we get there from below to above? That puts some nice upside pressure in the market. My goal here is to find the first test of the area that I care about, so the balance extreme, and that's where I'm going to try to position myself for the continuation of that move. I always want to think, okay, where are we in relation to the balances and how do we get there? Regardless of volatility, regardless of anything, it's going to really break down the confusion barrier as to market movement, because sometimes markets move fast. So if I say this is a general balance, you can see it's a nice belly, right? Whether the top is here or a bit higher, that's kind of irrelevant for now, but you can see that it's a nice belly. So we start the momentum move above this area, 63 to 65. That tells us that now that we're within this region, the idea to hold that area as a pullback to continue this leg higher is going to be for that bullish narrative. Now, the breakdown under, right, now that flips the script. So it's not only to keep on side, but it's also to be aware of where the actual structural shifts happen, because malleability is everything, right? I can have a bias and live and die by it, but it's not really going to get me anywhere far. So I want to be malleable with the approach that I take of the storyline, right? Storyline is one part, but if it breaks down, you don't want to be consistently trying to ping longs, right? Even under 40 like we saw today, yeah, there was some instances where order flow told us, you know what, it's not the craziest idea to try to long into these lows, but if I'm going to stick to my narrative, unless we can get a better sweep above that 40, it's not the best of ideas for me to constantly try to knife into this and pick this low out, because we can still see that continued drop of selling continues to increase into lows. It's just an approach that I take, right? A mix of price action, a mix of auction market theory plus order flow to help me better understand where we are situationally in the market. So I limit my confusion. So if you want to learn more about this stuff, you can check us out at community.tradeproacademy.com. And remember, we've got the live recording of our futures course. You can go and check that out as well. And I'll see you guys there.